The morning it started, Levi Harden had grease under his fingernails and a cold cup of coffee sitting on the hood of a '67 Mustang he'd been restoring for 8 months. He wasn't expecting anyone. The garage sat at the edge of Millhaven, Tennessee, population 4,200, give or take whoever had left since the mill closed. The sign out front said Harden Auto, Restoration and Repair, and the letters were sun-faded enough that most people who passed on Route 9 probably couldn't read it at full speed. That suited Levi fine. He had enough work. He didn't need more. What he needed was for the carburetor in front of him to stop behaving like it had a personal grievance against him. His daughter Bea was at school. That was the thought that ran underneath everything else, like a river under ice. Bea is at school. She'll be home at 3:15. He checked the time the same way other men check their pulse. So when the black SUV pulled into the gravel lot at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, Levi looked up with the kind of expression that didn't commit to anything. The woman who stepped out didn't look like she'd ever been to Millhaven before. Not because of the clothes, exactly. Though the coat was clearly expensive, charcoal wool, fitted, but because of the way she looked at everything like she was calculating its value and finding it acceptable. She had dark hair pulled back and the kind of posture that came from years of being looked at. She stopped a few feet from the garage bay and looked at him. Is this Harden Auto? Sign says so. She glanced at the sign. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile. The sign says Harden Auto. The E is gone. Vandals, Levi said. Or whether I've stopped investigating. She looked at the Mustang, then at the tools laid out on the workbench with the precision of a surgical tray, then back at him. I need something restored, she said. Something specific. I'm backed up about 4 months. I was told you were the best within 200 miles. Whoever told you that was either flattering me or had very low standards for the surrounding area. She reached into her bag and set a photograph on the hood of the Mustang, careful not to set it on anything wet. It was a car, a 1962 Lincoln Continental, 4-door convertible, midnight blue, immaculate in the photo but clearly not immaculate anymore. Levi looked at the photograph for a long moment. Where is it now, he said. In a storage facility outside Nashville. It's been there for 11 years. 11 years. He picked up the photograph. The Continental suicide doors were the kind of thing that made a certain kind of person feel something complicated. What's wrong with it? Everything, I'm told. The interior is beyond saving. The engine hasn't run since 2014. There's rust along the undercarriage, and the convertible mechanism is frozen. Who owned it? She paused, not like she didn't know the answer, more like she was deciding how much of the answer to give. My father, she said. He died last spring. Levi set the photograph down. I'm sorry. He loved that car more than almost anything. She said it without bitterness, just the plain fact of it. He used to say it was the only thing that always did exactly what it was supposed to. Levi thought about his wife for a half second, and then stopped thinking about her, the way he'd learned to do. I can look at it, he said. I'm not promising a timeline. I'm not asking for one. She held out her hand. Sloane Whitaker. He shook it. Levi Harden. She came back Thursday with the car on a flatbed, which told him she'd been reasonably confident he'd say yes. He spent an hour walking around it before he said anything. She stood near the garage door with her arms crossed, not fidgeting, not looking at her phone. He noticed that. Most people couldn't stand silence for more than 90 seconds. The Continental was in worse shape than the photograph suggested, which was usually how it went. The chrome was pitted. The seats were cracked leather, dry as old bark. The engine bay had the particular smell of oil and time that Levi associated with cars that had been loved and then abandoned, which was its own kind of grief. He crouched next to the undercarriage and ran his hand along a section of frame. You know what you're getting into here, he said. This is a full restoration. We're talking 18 months minimum, depending on parts availability. The Continental's not easy to source. I know. It's going to cost. I know that too. He stood up and looked at her. What do you do, Ms. Whitaker? I run a company. She said it the way people said I have a dog. It was true, but it wasn't the most interesting thing about them. What kind? Infrastructure software. We build the systems that other systems run on. She looked at the car. It's less interesting than it sounds. Software that runs systems, Levi said. And you drove out to Millhaven, Tennessee to restore a 1962 Lincoln. I flew into Nashville. Drove from there. She paused. My father grew up 20 miles from here, Cookville. That explained something Levi hadn't known he was trying to explain. He told her he'd start with a full assessment and send her a written estimate. She gave him a business card, the kind printed on heavy stock with just a name and a number, no title, and left. He stood in the garage after the flatbed pulled away and looked at the Continental for a long time. Then he went to pick up Bia from school. His daughter was 9 years old and had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness, which was a combination that kept Levi simultaneously grateful and exhausted. She climbed into the truck and immediately started telling him about a disagreement she'd had with her teacher about whether a tomato was a vegetable, a conversation she was clearly not finished with. She said in the context of cooking it's a vegetable, Bia said, with the careful precision of someone building a legal case. But that's just agreeing that context can override facts, which means nothing is actually what it is. That's a philosophical position, Levi said. Your teacher might not have meant to open that door. Well, she did. He drove. The hills outside Millhaven were going orange and red, the kind of October that looked like someone had set the countryside on fire and forgotten to put it out. Dad, Bia said. Yeah, you're thinking about the car. He glanced at her. Why do you say that? Because you get this face, like you're solving something nobody asked you to solve yet. He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. Sloane Whitaker called on Saturday to ask about the assessment. He told her it would be ready Monday. She said fine, and then, instead of hanging up, said, Is Millhaven always this quiet? Mostly, Levi said. You been here? I drove through yesterday. I was curious about my father's route. He used to drive through on the way to see his sister. The town's changed some. Mill closed about 8 years back. What do people do now? Same things people do everywhere. Figure it out. He paused. Why are you still in the area? A beat. I'm working remotely this week. It seemed like a reasonable place. Levi had the feeling, not quite suspicion, not quite interest, that Sloane Whitaker didn't do anything that wasn't intentional. That reasonable probably meant something specific that she wasn't saying. There's a diner on Main, he said. Doris makes the best pecan pie in 4 counties. If you haven't eaten. I haven't, she said. Thank you. She came by the garage on Monday for the estimate, and she brought 2 cups of coffee from the diner, which he hadn't asked for, and which was either presumptuous or considerate, depending on how you looked at it. He decided to look at it as considerate. He walked her through the assessment. The engine was rebuildable. The body was solid under the rust. The interior would need to be stripped completely. He knew a woman in Knoxville who did period-correct upholstery and was meticulous about it. The convertible top mechanism needed a full rebuild, which meant sourcing hydraulic components that hadn't been manufactured in 40 years. It's achievable, he said, but I want you to understand what you're committing to. This car is going to take everything I have for a long time. I can't rush it. I don't want it rushed, Sloane said. My father wouldn't have wanted it rushed. Levi looked at the Continental. He drove it much? When I was small. Before the company really took off. She set her coffee down on a clean part of the workbench. He took me to school in it once, in 2nd grade. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I told him that. She stopped. He said, Some things earn their beauty. This one earned it. Levi was quiet for a moment. What did he mean? He bought it for $300 in 1987 from a man who thought it was totaled. He fixed it himself over 2 years, evenings and weekends, in a rented garage bay. He didn't know what he was doing when he started. He figured it out. Levi understood then with the particular clarity of a man who had also once stood in front of something broken and decided to figure it out, why she was here. It wasn't just the car. He signed the work order. She countersigned. October became November. Levi worked on the Continental in the hours after Bia went to bed, 3 or 4 nights a week. When the garage was quiet and the town outside was the particular kind of dark that only existed in small places. He'd always worked better at night. His wife had teased him about it. You're like a raccoon, Levi. You come alive when everyone else is asleep. He didn't think about her often anymore. 6 years was long enough that the grief had settled into something more like topography. It was always there. It shaped the ground he walked on, but he didn't fall into it the way he once had. Bia did not remember her mother. This was a fact Levi carried differently on different days. Sloane came by the garage every week or so, sometimes with a reason, a question about the restoration, a detail she'd found in an old photograph, and sometimes seemingly without one. He noticed she always called first, never just appeared. In late November, she came by on a Saturday morning when Bia was there, doing homework at the workbench with her textbooks spread across a section of drop cloth, eating half a sandwich. The two of them looked at each other. "Hi," Bia said. "Hi," Sloane said. "Are you the Lincoln lady?" Sloane glanced at Levi. He raised a hand slightly. "Don't look at me." "I suppose I am," Sloane said. "Dad says it's the most interesting car he's worked on in years." Bia said this with the tone of someone reporting a verified fact. "He said it has integrity." "He said that?" "He says that about cars sometimes, that they have integrity. It means they were built to be exactly what they are." Bia picked up her pencil and returned to her homework. "Dad doesn't say that about many things." Sloane looked at Levi. He looked at the floor. The problem arrived in December the way problems usually did, quietly and then all at once. His name was Garrett Foster. Levi had known him since high school, which was long enough to have a complicated history, and short enough, in the way of small towns, that you couldn't fully escape it. Garrett had moved back to Millhaven 3 years ago after a decade in commercial real estate in Atlanta, and he'd been positioning himself since then as the person who was going to bring the town back. Levi didn't have a particular opinion about Garrett, or he hadn't, until December. Garrett came to the garage on a Wednesday afternoon, which was already a problem because Levi didn't like unannounced visitors. He stood in the bay and looked at the Continental with the expression of a man calculating its value, which was different from the way Sloane had looked at it. "Nice," Garrett said. "What year is that?" 62. "What's it worth?" finished. "That depends on who wants it and why." Garrett smiled. He had a good smile, the kind that had probably opened a lot of doors. "I'm going to be honest with you, Levi. I need a favor." Levi set down his wrench. "Go ahead." "Sloane Whitaker. You know who she is? What her company does?" "She's a client. She's more than a client. Her company builds infrastructure software. She's been in conversations with the county for the last 8 months about a data center project. 1,200 jobs. It would change this town." Garrett paused. "I need you to put in a word." Levi looked at him. "A word? You've built a relationship with her. She trusts you." "I've been trying to get a meeting and her assistant keeps redirecting me to a junior partner. I'm a mechanic," Levi said. "I restore old cars. I don't involve myself in business deals. Just mention the project. Tell her Millhaven's worth a real look." "No," Levi said, simply, like the word didn't need any company. Garrett's smile didn't quite disappear. "You're not even going to think about it?" "I thought about it while you were talking." Levi picked up his wrench. "Close the bay door on your way out. It's cold." He didn't think about telling Sloane. It was a small-town favor ask, the kind that happened constantly, and he didn't see a reason to make it her problem. That was the first mistake. In January, Sloane arrived at the garage looking different than usual. Not upset, exactly. Controlled in a way that took effort. She stood in front of the Continental, which was now stripped to bare metal on the driver's side, the chrome removed, the surface prepped for the first stage of bodywork. "Someone told me," she said, "that Garrett Foster approached you about the data center project." Levi was quiet. "They said you told him no." She turned to look at him. "Is that accurate?" "Yes." "Why didn't you mention it to me?" "I didn't think it was relevant to the work." Sloane looked at the Continental. "Garrett Foster is not who he presents himself as. He's been in contact with my director of operations. Without my knowledge, without authorization, trying to negotiate terms on a project that I've already decided not to move forward on." Levi set down his tool. "Why did you decide not to?" "Because the data center would require the county to rezone the land along Route 9, which runs through the edge of town. The economic modeling my team did shows the job creation projections are inflated by about 40%. The permanent employment numbers are a third of what's being promised." She paused. "And because Foster's company is a silent partner in the construction bid." Levi was quiet for a moment. "He's selling Millhaven a future that mostly benefits him," he said. "Yes." She looked at him. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wasn't sure how involved you were with him. I told him no? I know." She looked at the floor, then back up. "I should have trusted that." Something settled between them, the way things settle when the air pressure changes. "The director," Levi said. "The one Foster contacted. He's no longer in that role." Levi nodded slowly. He understood then what the last few weeks had cost her, Not just the professional betrayal, but the kind of interior recalculation that happened when you discovered someone you'd trusted had been operating in bad faith. How long did he work for you? Levi asked. 7 years. He didn't say he was sorry, because he didn't think that was what she needed. Instead, he said, "You want to see how the bodywork's progressing?" She looked at him for a moment. Then she said yes. He showed her the sections where the rust had been cut out and the new steel welded in. Invisible work, the kind that would never be seen once the car was finished, but that held everything else up. "My father used to talk about the hidden work," Sloane said. "He said most people only see the surface of things." He was right. He also said the hidden work is where you find out what a person actually is. She ran her fingers along a seam, barely touching it. He would have liked you. Levi didn't know what to do with that, so he did what he usually did, which was let it sit there without disturbing it. February. The engine was rebuilt. Levi had sourced a correct specification distributor from a collector in Ohio and spent 3 evenings recalibrating the timing by hand. The sound of it turning over for the first time, a low, sustained rumble that filled the garage and seemed to vibrate through the concrete floor, was the kind of thing that made the 18 months feel worth it before they were even finished. He called Sloane and held the phone toward the running engine without saying anything. There was silence on her end. Then she said, "Oh, just that." He shut the engine off. "First start," he said. "Runs clean." "We've got a long way to go still." "That sound," she said, and stopped. "Yeah," he said. "I know." B had questions, the way Bia always had questions. "Is the Lincoln lady coming back?" she asked one evening in March, doing her homework at the kitchen table while Levi cooked. "Probably next week," he said. "She checks in pretty regularly. Do you like her?" Levi kept his eyes on the pan. "She's a good client." "That's not what I asked." He looked at his daughter. She looked back at him with the complete composure of a 9-year-old who knew she had said something accurate and was waiting for the adult to catch up. "Mind your homework," he said. Bia looked back at her textbook. "I'm just saying she's nice," she said, with the carefully casual tone of someone who had said exactly what they intended. "And she's never on her phone when she's here." "Most adults are always on their phone." Levi stirred the pan. "She pays attention," Bea said. "That's all I'm saying." He asked her to dinner in April, which he had not planned to do and did without any ceremony, standing in the garage while she was looking at the reinstalled chrome trim, which had come back from the polisher looking like something poured rather than manufactured. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said. "Not at Doris's. Somewhere in Nashville if you're willing to drive." Sloane turned to look at him. She had the expression she sometimes got when he said something unexpected, not surprised, exactly, but recalibrating. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They went to dinner. He had not been to a restaurant in Nashville in 4 years, a fact he kept to himself. She ordered without looking at the prices, which he'd expected, and she asked him about his work at the automotive company before Millhaven, which he hadn't expected. He told her about the engineering team he'd led, the projects that had felt like they mattered and the ones that hadn't. He told her about moving back when his wife got sick, about taking over the garage from a man named Pritchett who'd wanted to retire. He told her about the particular satisfaction of working alone on something until it was right, without a team, without a deadline, without anyone's approval required. She listened in the way she did everything, completely, without waiting for her turn to talk. "What do you miss?" she said. "About the company work." "The complexity," he said. "Some problems are interesting." "Not many." "The Continental is interesting," she said. "The Continental," he said, "is one of the most interesting things I've worked on in years." She smiled. It was different from the almost smile she'd given him in the beginning, that first day with the photograph. This one was real. "B told me you said it had integrity," she said. "B talks too much." "B is extraordinary," Sloane said simply. Levi looked at the table, then at her. "She is," he said. "Yeah." In June, with 2 months left on the restoration, Garrett Foster made one more attempt. This one wasn't directed at Levi. It was directed at the county planning board, and it involved a revised proposal that skirted the zoning issue by cutting the Route 9 corridor from the footprint. Levi read about it in the local paper over breakfast. He called Sloane. "I saw it," she said. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," she said. "The project doesn't meet the terms my company requires for community development partnerships. That hasn't changed. And I've been in contact with the county administrator directly. They understand the full picture now. Does Foster know you're not going to move forward? He will, shortly. A pause. I'm not interested in punishing him, Levi. I'm interested in an accurate outcome. He thought about that for a long time after they hung up. An accurate outcome. Not justice in the cinematic sense, not Garrett humiliated publicly, not some spectacular reversal. Just the truth finally sitting in the right place. He'd spent years after his wife died being angry at things that couldn't answer for themselves. The illness, the timing, the specific cruelty of a life that ran out before Bia was old enough to keep the memory. At some point he'd had to stop building a case and start deciding what to do with what remained. He hadn't found a clean way to say that to anyone. He wasn't sure it could be said cleanly. The Continental was finished in August. Levi drove it into the sunlight on a Saturday morning. The first time it had been outside in 11 years. The first time it had moved under its own power in longer than that. And parked it in the gravel lot. The midnight blue had been restored to its original depth. The chrome caught the light the way chrome was meant to, the way it had in the photograph her father had taken in 1987 after 2 years of evenings and weekends, figuring it out. Sloane stood in the lot and didn't say anything for a long time. Bia sat on the tailgate of Levi's truck and watched her. "It's exactly how I remembered it," Sloane finally said. Her voice had the quality of something fragile held carefully. "It should be," Levi said. "That's what the work was for." She walked around it slowly, the way he had the first day it arrived on the flatbed. She ran her hand along the rear fin, the chrome surround of the taillight, the top of the driver's door. She stopped at the driver's side and looked in through the window at the restored interior. Ivory leather, period-correct stitching, the original dash instrumentation, rebuilt and recalibrated. She opened the door and sat down. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there with her hands on the steering wheel, looking out through the windshield, and Levi watched from a distance because some things don't need a witness. Not really. After a while she got out. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. "It's a good car," he said. "It was always a good car." She smiled and then she looked at Bia, who had hopped off the tailgate and was now standing nearby doing a very poor impression of someone who hadn't been watching. "B," Sloane said, "would you like to sit in it?" B looked at Levi. He raised his chin slightly. "Go ahead." She climbed carefully into the driver's seat, both hands on the wheel, and looked through the windshield at the gravel lot, and Route 9 beyond it, and the low hills in the distance, orange-red already in the August heat, already looking like October. "It's so big," Bia said. "It used to feel big to me too," Sloane said. "When I was small." B considered this. "Did your dad drive you places in it?" "Once," Sloane said. "To school. 2nd grade. What happened?" Everyone stared, Sloane said. "My father waved at them like it was a parade." B laughed. It was her real laugh, the one Levi didn't hear often enough, the one that sounded exactly like her mother's. He stood in the lot and looked at his daughter in the old Lincoln and let himself stay there, in that moment, without moving past it or ahead of it. This was the thing he had slowly, imperfectly learned. Not every moment needed to be rushed toward the next one. Some of them were just what they were, and that was enough. That was actually quite a lot. Sloane walked over and stood beside him. They didn't say anything. The engine wasn't running. The day was warm. Bia had begun with great ceremony to adjust the rear-view mirror to a position that made no sense for her height. "She's going to be something," Sloane said quietly. "She already is," Levi said. The Continental sat in the sun, midnight blue and whole, exactly what it had always been, exactly what it was meant to be. And for the first time in a very long time, Levi Harden stood in the light outside his own garage and did not feel like a man waiting for something to go wrong.